Good evening. My name is Mr. Tofiq, and today we're going to be discussing about the Age of Enlightenment, which was a very important and prominent time in history, which started in 1715 and ended in 1789. The Age of Enlightenment was actually a very important time when it comes to history in general, because we need to first look at how it started, why it started, and what was the outcome of Enlightenment. And when looking at Enlightenment in general, we have to understand that it still continues to play a huge and important role in our daily lives, not just in history but also in politics as well. To start the presentation, I would like to quote one of the most important figures of political economy and the era of Enlightenment in general, Adam Smith. Adam Smith was a political economist. He was known as the father of political economy, actually, and he in his famous book, The Wealth of Nations, has stated that there should be this idea of free market economy. And what does free market economy mean? What free market economy means is that the government should not fully regulate the economy and let it basically regulate itself. By that, he means that if the government does not touch the economy, then the businesses that are good and strong, they will thrive, and the weaker businesses will basically disappear. And the idea of this is basically called laissez-faire, in French meaning let them do. And this idea played a very important role, not just in the economy of the world and many countries to this day, but also it was one of the main principles of the American economy, even today as well. Now, let's start with the three main points of Enlightenment. There was reason, individualism, and skepticism. Now, let's start with reason. Enlightenment thinkers typically denounce supernatural occurrences as mere superstition. Now, here is where it might get a little bit confusing. You might think all Enlightenment thinkers were atheists, but this was not the case. In fact, most were not. To a degree, the Enlightenment basically did not fully agree with the ideas of atheism, but more commonly it resulted in a mix between Christianity and scientific rationalism, basically combining Christianity and scientific reason between occurrences that happen throughout life. This is best illustrated by the deist movement that gripped Europe and United States during the late 18th century. So what is deism? In simple terms, deism is the belief that God exists but chooses to let the universe basically proceed according to natural law. Deists deny supernatural occurrences and insist that God is knowable through reason and nature, not divine revelation. So there is a reason for everything on why it's happening. There's a scientific reason for many things that happen. Deism is often conceptualized by the comparison of a clock and a clockmaker. In a deist view, God is the great clockmaker who created the universe, the world, like a clock, and then allows it to run according to natural operation, without supernatural intervention, basically. Not all, but some of America's founding fathers were also deists, it's important to note, most notably Thomas Jefferson. Now, then we have to discuss individualism as well. Individualism played a very important role when it comes to Enlightenment. One of the big changes in during the Enlightenment was basically the way people thought about things. In the Middle Ages, people thought that life was supposed to be hard. They grew up thinking that life was nothing but hard work and war. However, around the 1300s, people in Europe started to understand that there's a new way of thinking, which was called humanism. People thought that life could be enjoyable and they could have comforts. They started to think that people should be educated and things like art, music, and science could make life better for everyone. This was a real change in the way people thought. And then came skepticism. Now, skepticism was a very important role, played a very important role in Enlightenment as well, where people started to question things, especially when it came to the Catholic Church basically choosing who God chose to be the next king. And this is where skepticism plays a huge role, because people start to understand that these ideas are being exploited, as I previously stated. So basically, people understood that people should have the right to not believe everything that's being told to them by the Catholic Church. Now, the Enlightenment or the Age of Reason began in Europe, France in the 1700s and spread to many parts of the world. Thinkers of Enlightenment objected to the absolute power of royal rulers and of the Roman Catholic Church. They used reason and logical thinking and science to attack this power. Basically, in order to understand how Enlightenment started and how it works, is first we need to understand what was going on back then during as the French Revolution was happening and what led to the French Revolution, because the exploitation of power by King Louis XVI played a very important role, because due to the food shortages and the incredibly high exploitative rate of taxation, which led the citizens to a breaking point, which ultimately led to the Enlightenment. Now, what were the main results of Enlightenment? First, there was the American Revolution, and the reason for the American Revolution was because of the British colonizing America for their own economic gains, and basically exploiting their economy for the advantage of their own. And in order to understand this, we have to know that one of the main reasons behind this was the high taxation that was introduced, which was also very prominent in the French Revolution. Now, because of these kinds of actions that took place, especially most prominently, there was the Stamp Act when it comes to the American Revolution, where people start to realize that the British are slowly increasing and putting taxes on everything, and they are soon going to be bombarded with high taxes. And then there was the Boston Tea Party, which basically the British introduced them a new act, basically telling them that all the tea that they were going to purchase was going to be from their own plantations and from their own colonized lands. And this made America very angry, because these citizens started to understand that they are under complete control. And then comes the French Revolution. Now, the French Revolution also was similar to the American Revolution. One of the reasons being that it also was because of exploiting of citizens, but not by being colonized by another country, but instead being under control of a corrupt king, which was King Louis XVI. Now, he basically used a lot of the money that was coming from the taxes in order to basically put out lavish parties and basically to spend it on himself, and leaving all the citizens to live a very miserable and poor life. Now, there are a few key things that we should note when it comes to philosophers. Now, philosophers suggested idea. They did inspire, in fact, revolutions, but never actively tried to start one. Their ideas basically ended up being a domino effect to many people who ended up basically spreading those ideas, and at the end, inevitably resulting in revolutions. Now, they also believed heavily in progress and individualism. That's also very important to note. Let's start with John Locke, who was born in 1632 and passed away in 1704. Now, he believed that people are reasonable and can govern themselves. He believed in natural rights, that everyone is born with a right to life, liberty, and property. He believed that government should protect the rights or be overthrown by the people. He believed in the idea that people should choose that is going to govern them, and if they fail to do that, they should have the full right and power to overthrow them. Now, John Locke was an English philosopher and a physician, widely regarded as one of the most influential of Enlightenment thinkers, and commonly known as the father of liberalism. Considered one of the first British empiricists, following the tradition of Sir Francis Bacon, which we will later discuss as well in a different part. He is equally important to social contract theory. His work greatly affected the development of political philosophy, and for example, the social contract theory is a theory or a model that originated during the Age of Enlightenment and usually concerns the legitimacy of authority of the state over the individual. Social contract arguments typically say that individuals have consented explicitly or to surrender some of their freedoms and submit it to authority in exchange for protection of their remaining rights. Basically, they sacrifice some of their freedom in order to live a safe life. To continue with Thomas Hobbes, he was actually the complete opposite of John Locke, for example. He was convinced that man was terrible and selfish, and the fact that there should be a brutal ruler in order to keep everyone in its place, to make sure that there is no chaos and everything is followed by rules and order, and that order and being strong and brutal is one of the key features of making sure that there is peace and there is no chaos in society. And he believed that there should be absolute monarchy in the government. Now let's continue on with JeanJacques Rousseau, who was born in 1712 and passed away in 1778. He had very distinct ideas that he had regarding society. He believed that people are good, were born good, but later on they were corrupted by society. So if a person ends up being bad or goes the wrong route, it's because of society. Now, he also stated that government should be freely formed by the people and not forced on them by whoever is powerful. He also believed that social contract, where people agree to give up some of their freedom to have a good society, as I stated before. There should be total equality, no more classes, and he believed that the best form of government is a direct democracy. He does think that society plays a very important role when it comes to the corruption of people and how they are negatively affected by society. So he is a very big critic when it comes to society in general. And JeanJacques Rousseau plays a very prominent role when it comes to the ideas of enlightenment in general. Then we come to Baran Dumont, born in 1689 and passed away in 1755. Now, he believed that people were good, but rulers were corrupt. He thought that corruption was inevitable at some point, and he did believe that there should be a separation of powers, and by that there should not be a concentration of power on individuals. That there should be power should be divided between a ruler, a lawmaker, and body of people in general, basically, that make decisions, so that any decision that's made should go through a group of people in order to accept that kind of decision, in order so there won't be power would not be in the hands of one person or in individuals in general. And he believed that there should be such thing as checks and balances, where each branch should have power over the other. Thus, in these kinds of ways, there wouldn't be any corruption and exploitation of power. And he believed the best form of government is representative democracy.